Sashi Kuki Jukshin Visotram Rira Vinshin Yende Gimpadi Sangye Shindu Nite Uwardi Dokun Nanda Shinda Shuparsho Idam Rana Mandala Kamir Tayani Sangre Sridam Saki Choknamba Janchu Vardu Dagni Yatsuchi Dagi Jinyang Gipe Sonamki Yola Benshir Sangye Juparsho Sangye Chunam Soki Choknamba Janchu Vardu Dagni Yapsuchi Dagi Jinyang Gipe Sonamki Yola Benshir Sangye Juparsho Sangye Chudam Soki Choknamba Janchu Vardu Dagni Yasuchi Dagi Jinyang Gipe Sonamki Drola Penchir Sangye Juparsho. Let's start by resting. Close your eyes. Relax your body. Relax your face. We're going to start just by letting go. And if you can, try to feel the sensation of your awareness descending down from the head to the ground. And all you're doing is breathing gently through the nose, letting the mind settle, releasing all your concerns, releasing all those fears and wants and desires. Letting go of all the noise and the chit-chat that's been with you all day. Releasing all the tension that you felt in your shoulders and your neck, your back, your hips. Spend a few breaths letting go and just being aware. We're going to start with this meditation with a question. The same question that we started with last time. Right now, today, what is your vision of what would truly make you happy? What would bring you the fulfillment, the joy and satisfaction you've been wanting all along? As these ideas come to mind, in the spirit of loving kindness to yourself, every time you breathe out, begin to arouse the aspiration. May it be so, may it be so. May I find such well-being, such happiness. Use your breath almost in a way to put it out into the world, letting go, breathing life into the vision. And then move into the realm of possibility. With each out-breath, begin to imagine here and now, realizing what it is that you desire. Imagine and embody what that can look like, feel like. Don't just put it out there, be in it. Now we'll move on to the second part. And we'll begin with an observation that in order to realize the happiness that we seek, it's almost impossible to do it alone. Our lives are so intertwined with each other. So with this awareness, in order to realize the happiness that you seek, what would you love to receive from the world around you? It can be near and far, short-term or long-term. But what support do you want from the world? What would enable you to realize your heart's desire? And in the spirit of loving kindness to yourself, as these thoughts come to mind, with each in-breath, arousing or filling with the aspiration, may I receive all I truly need from the world around me to find the happiness I seek. May reality rise up to meet me. Use each in-breath to aspire that it may be so. And for the remainder time, begin to draw on the power of your imagination. Imagining you receiving all that you truly need. All the things that will help you and support you to find and obtain the happiness you truly seek. Visualize and embody what that would look like and feel like. So if you haven't noticed, we're building. Yeah? Do you guys remember, do you notice that the first two were the same as last week? I hope so.
Yes.
Does it feel, do the first two aspects feel familiar to you?
Yes.
Relaxing, thinking about what you want. We're gonna do this segment again for another, at least one more, maybe two more. We'll do it, and then start building. We're about halfway through on the meditation, so there's two more steps to it, and then you'll get the whole complete meditation. If it speaks to you, please practice it at home. And if you have questions with the steps, feel free to email me. You should all have my contact information by now. If you don't have my contact information, come up and send me your email address, or just give me your email address and I'll make sure that we're in contact. I don't know. I find this to be a really beautiful meditation personally. So I hope it does help you. If it's not right for you now, maybe at some point in your life you can have it as a resource. But we'll continue building on it so that there's a bit of consistency with the type of meditations we do in class. So here's the thing. The thing about your groups that I would really like and encourage for you to all do is they're meant there for, I created them so that you have people to go to and you have people to ask questions to. Like if you don't get something or something is strange or you feel nervous or self-conscious, those are the people that you should be able to ask those questions. If they are not giving you a safe space, let me know and I will make sure that will be happening, but that's the point. I know that some of you have created WhatsApp groups as well, which is amazing and awesome and great. And what I always say is if you have questions and you're emailing me, please share that with your groups, because if you have the question, most likely someone else has the question. And if you aren't in a group, find one that you like and you know, you guys that are already in one, make sure you add in people to your WhatsApp channels if that's how you're communicating. But it's really a place so that you don't feel like you're getting lost. I don't know. The first times that I was in a Dharma class like this, I would say for the first, honestly, 3 years, I kind of felt a bit lost. Like I just kind of came, did my thing, and peaced out. And that was my whole situation. It's not the case for all of you, but I think it would have helped me to just have other people I can ask questions to, or just be like, what is this? Do I have to do homework? I feel a lot of pressure. Everyone else is like, just all those things, like all valid, all important. You should never feel like you are uncertain about things or unclear about things in terms of the process that we have. If it's about content, that might take some time, but that's why you have people in your group to ask questions and see how they are also like workshopping these ideas. Like, I don't get this, or I really hate meditating and I don't know if I really like that. I mean, those are great questions to ask each other, okay? So that's what they're meant for. So use them, use each other, help each other, make it easier for you. Life is hard enough. This is not a place to make it more difficult, okay? So last week we started with the fourth opening line of the Abhidharma Kosha. We talked about karma as the movement of the mind and what follows, right? Which is what your quiz was about. Tonight we're going to talk about virtue and non-virtue and motivation of karma. So basically the different types of karmas, and we'll build on it. Before we start, though, do I need to accept more homework assignments? Everyone's good. Okay. Before we start, though, actually, Supriya, can I borrow your pen?
Sure.
We'll
Do we hold on to the quizzes right now? Or turn in the quizzes? We didn't finish it.
That's okay. Then just finish during the break or after. Actually, you're going to be probably grading them anyway, so.
Okay.
So before we dive into karma, this class will be touching. We're not going to go deep into it, but it is the other side, the other coin, right? The other side of the coin of karma, which is emptiness. Now, in the Abhidharma school, they don't call it emptiness, right? What do they call it? No self. So if I use the word emptiness, that means I'm slipping. We're in the Abhidharma school. So you'll see the term selflessness or no self. So we're going to do the pen exercise. I know you've heard this, like some of you, like a bazillion times, like Thomas and me, but never hurts. It's always a thing. So here's the pen exercise. What is this? Wait, who's never heard the pen exercise? Okay. Good. Okay. This is going to be like mind-blowing. You wait for it. Okay. You're going to be like, I hope it is or not. You're like, what? I already knew that. Okay. So what is this?
A chew toy.
Michael, what's wrong with you? And Santa doesn't exist?
Yeah.
What? Okay. What is this? It's a pen. And so, as Michael ruined it. But if a dog, right, so it's a pen. If a dog came into the room, what would the dog think this was? A chew toy, right? It'd be something that they would chew. And so the question then is it a pen or is it a chew toy?
To me, it's a pen.
It's a pen. Is it a pen or a chew toy? To you, it's a pen.
Depends.
It depends on who's looking at it, right? It depends, right? Which is good. You're smart. You're like, wait, it's a trick question. It depends on who's looking at it. So then the question, I would say, let's make it more, a little bit more real. I'm G. How many G's are in the room? One G in the room. Yeah.
No G.
There's no G. Really? I don't exist? Do you not see me? Oh my God, do I not exist? I felt that way sometimes. I was wondering.
I see it from
your own side.
Mind.
Yeah, your mind. So how many G's are in the room then? If you see it from your mind.
As many people as in this room.
As many people as there are in this room. Because all of you have different perspectives.
Yourself.
Right, including myself, right? I have a perspective of what I think of who I am. You have a perspective of who you think I am. And so do you. And all of you have different perspectives, right? So this idea of emptiness, right? So here's the pen as one example, which is what Geshe Michael Roach uses, which is actually like so brilliant and so simple and actually profound, right? Is that this concept of no self in this school or in the mind-only school, which we'll talk about in this course, even in other courses, when we talk about the word emptiness, when you hear this term emptiness in Buddhism, in Tibetan Buddhism, is the idea that everything, we'll use me as an example, I am not self-existent, right? I do not come from my own side. This pen is not self-existent, which means that if this indeed were a pen, then it would, from its own side, be somehow announcing to you and projecting onto all of, well, I should say it's projecting. It'd be announcing to you that this is a pen. If G existed from her own self-existently, then you would all have the same perspective of who I am. You'd have all the same idea of who I am. Some of you are like, oh, I really like her new haircut. That's so awesome. Some of you are like, what the hell was that? That's like a weird thing to do. Some of you are like, is she 20? Some of you are like, maybe she's 40. I don't, right? There's all these different things, right? I've heard that, right? So there's all these different things. And if I was self-existent, then I would look like I was 25 all the time to everybody and be consistent with a fabulous haircut, right? With these cool glasses. And that's not the case. So the idea of emptiness is that I'm sorry, help me out. I can see you. The point of emptiness is that it's you that's projecting onto me. You project onto me, right? Who you think I am based on your karmas, which we'll go into that aspect of it more today. Some of it more today, more later in the course, okay? It means that you have your own karmas that are forced upon you. You've planted seeds in the past that have been ripening that are going to decide that you like my haircut today, or you don't, or you think I'm old, or you think I'm too young, or you think I'm blah, 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 blah. And we do that all the time. We go around thinking that this wall, I like this wall. I don't like this wall. He's a jerk. No, he's not. I like her. I don't like her. I hate my job. I love all these different things that we have that we go around in our life. We actually act as if those things are self-existent. The best example that I have that actually works for me is when I think of a jerk, right? There's someone I know that's like a total jerk, and I'm like, he's such a douche. He's a douche. He's self-existently a douchebag is how I actually think. I do. I actually think that way sometimes. Right? We do that, don't we? Where you're like, I mean, I was just going to talk about the president, but let's not do that. But, but you self-existently think that certain people are that way. Absolute. It is non-negotiable. They are just that way. But the fact is that if they were indeed that way, they would be that way all the time, every time, anytime. And they're not, because believe it or not, like, his wife actually likes him. Like, it's crazy, but she likes him. She likes him. She actually thinks he's like a pretty good guy. Right? Huh? Yeah.
Well, that's why the president is such a great example.
It is actually.
Him because so many people adore him.
Yeah. Adore.
I mean.
No, really.
Totally. I don't know if anyone here adores him.
Yeah.
And I apologize for
yeah.
you, but I just don't understand it.
I
can find compassion.
Yes.
For the suffering.
Sure.
Being, but. Man.
Yeah. I know families that have split up, literally, do not talk to each other anymore because of who's in presidency right now. Literally. Like, won't talk. I know Thanksgivings, like the last couple of years, have been destroyed because families are like, I am not sitting at the table with that person in my home. That is not it, because the president is X. And that mentality is what we're calling self-existent. That you think that person is actually static, cannot change ever, right? But that's not, from this philosophy, right? I'm not saying this is your philosophy, but from this philosophy, we're saying that, in fact, all things, including our president and me and this pen and this room and all of you, are actually empty or have no self, okay? I'm just going to leave it at that. We're going to go into emptiness and then we can, but this is not an emptiness class. I have to present the presentation of it, because when I talk about it and drop it in during the course, you're going to you have to understand conceptually what it means. It is not, it is something that for some of you that have heard it for the first time, it takes a while to wrap your head around. For those of you who have heard it for a long time, including myself, it still takes a long time to wrap my head around. It doesn't necessarily get any easier, but it gets a little bit more comfortable with, like, okay. And it's something you play with. I mean, that's just how that's how I approach it. It's something you understand and you apply and you work with and you see how it works and how it doesn't. But it is a very interesting concept that I would very much encourage you to just consider. And if it doesn't work for you, put it on the shelf, no problem. And we'll talk about karma and talk about virtue and non-virtue and good and bad and neutral and all that jazz, okay? Okay, cool. All right, so we're going to start with 3 kinds of karma. And we're going to start with gewa, which is a virtuous deed. Can we say du reshila? Du reshila. That means in the short term. Can we say namin? Namin. That means karmic result or ripening. So, and sometimes you'll hear as cooking. You'll often hear teachers, sometimes they'll say, cook that, right? And so when you hear something that's like, cook that, what does that mean? Or like, what is that? I think about like when I don't know, like rice for, yeah, you sit with it. Like my quinoa that I burn all the time because I just like neglect it. It's not instant, right? When you cook something, it's like burned it twice, 2 days in a row. It's terrible. Anyway, but when you cook something, it takes time, right? You simmer and you let it take time. So if I say to you, if you ask a question and I'm like, all right, I present information like emptiness, you're like, huh? What? I'm like, don't worry about it. Chill. Just cook it. I'll say cook it. And you'll hear Geshe Michael say that too. And you'll hear other Tibetan teachers say it sometimes. But that's what it means. It means that things don't happen instantly. And Arya Nagarjuna, thank you. Arya Nagarjuna would say in the scriptures, he would say, it's unfortunate that karma doesn't ripen so instantly because it doesn't, because things do have to cook, right? Things have to take time, is why we have a misunderstanding of karma and hence why we have samsara. What is samsara? Let me drop these fancy terms tonight. What's samsara?
Life of the real
Suffering, right? Samsaric. I think there's a documentary or a TV show on Netflix called Samsara. I don't know what it is. Anyway, Samsaric suffering is a documentary. It's beautiful, right? It's like a really beautiful cinematography and the colors.
Is that Sanskrit or Tibetan?
It's Sanskrit.
What's
Samsara.
the difference between samsara and dukkha?
We will talk about that.
Samsara is the cycle of suffering.
Yeah.
Because
The suffering itself.
Yeah, it's suffering. Yeah. The nature of dukkha is the samsara. There's like, you usually hear it as samsaric, like the samsaric nature. Yeah. Okay, can we say idu ongwa? And that is desirable and attractive. Can we say dewa? Is happiness. Can we say nongwa? Is to experience. Dang is and. Tendu is ultimately. Duknyel, that is suffering. So duknyel is actually comes to Tibetan. It comes from dukkha. Yeah. And the duknyel, this dukkha or the duknyel is suffering. It's mental and physical. Okay. Lay. From. Kyokpa is to protect. Nyangde. Nirvana. Dokje. It brings you. And Gewa is good deed and virtue. So this is what this means. So we're using Lame Chim Jampa Yang's definition. You'll see his definition at the end of the reading as well, and he's going to define the different kind of karmas that we're going to discuss tonight. Okay. So what he's saying is that virtue or good deed, you'll see them used interchangeably. And I'm cautious about the word good deed because I know that sometimes we think of like good, bad as like a judgment. That's not what it means. There's not a moral implication. Also understand too, it's a translation, right? And for those of you that know other languages, I always find that the English language can be a little flat sometimes, like good. I mean, it's, like the way we say good, like in Asian cultures, like in Korean, there's so many kinds of goods and flavors of goods, so like when we see like good deed is kind of the way it's been translated, or virtue, it's not like the way that we think of like good, like it's a moral implication. Okay, so just kind of understand that, and if you can, to your best ability. Okay, so he says virtue or good deed is something which brings you short-term pleasurable experience and ultimately protects you from the suffering by bringing you to nirvana. Okay. I'm going to read that again. Virtue or good deed is something which brings you short-term pleasurable experience and ultimately protects you from suffering by bringing you to nirvana. So this isn't in your homework, and we'll talk about it more next class, but there are 3 different kind of karmic outcomes that we have. That Lama Young is talking about. He says that there are the 3 different ones basically is that there's karma that ripens in this lifetime, which is kind of like an accelerated karma. It's the basis and foundation of what a lot of higher practices are about. Like how do you have more charge with your karma to be able to have them ripen in this lifetime? There's karmas that will ripen in your next lifetime, and then there are karmas that will ripen from your second life on. Okay, and really the main point of that is just to state that your karmas stick with you until they ripen. Okay, for the most part. Like we can get into the subtleties of it, but the most like biggest takeaway is that they stick with you. Nothing is lost in terms of the karma that you've planted. Okay. So back to the definition. What he's saying here is that you can collect good deeds, you can do good deeds, and it could give you a pleasurable experience, or you can collect good deeds with pleasurable experience that can get you to the ultimate freedom, and in which this school is what? Nirvana. Okay. And so then the question is, well, then how do we do that? Like, how does that work? How do we have our deeds that we do? How does that move forward to us to be able to reach nirvana? And so that gets into the conversation, the topic of dedication. And so we've talked about sometimes at the end, every time we've done class at the end, we do dedication. Do you remember that? It's like a short meditation where you feel what you feel and then you dedicate it. The idea here is that everything that you do and everything that you think, right, the movement of the mind, but everything that you do has a certain kind of energy to it. And you can decide and choose. Do you want to do something good and just let it kind of fizzle away with no impact? Or do you want to do something that actually goes towards something? And the way that you can actually have it go towards something is based on your dedication and your motivation and your intention. So for example, you're walking down the street and you see someone who is homeless on the street. It's winter. And you see them and you walk by and you have your headphones. I say your iPod, but I don't know who's using that much today. Okay, so you have your headphones in, you're on your phone, you're listening to music, or you're texting or looking at your Instagram page or your feed, and you see someone homeless and you're like, wow. You're just like, you just notice, and that's it. And then and nothing happens. You can either do that, or you can actually go by and you're like, oh, wow, they must be really cold, right? They must be really cold. And so there's a sense of sympathy that comes, right? So even in those two moments, when you walk, there's two different ways of how your mind is starting to think. There's one that's like, don't even notice, right? You're just like, what is that? And you just walk past. And then there's the walking and realizing like, that person must be really cold. There's the next layer where you're walking by and you realize, wow, that person must be really cold. You take your earphones out, you stop your music, and you decide that you're going to give that person some money or some food. Then because you're thinking, wow, they must be really cold. They must be really hungry. Maybe they can, maybe there's something I can do. There's a sense of empathy that comes from that. Or you can be walking, realize that there's someone there, it's cold, take off your headphones, turn off your music, look at them, understand that, wow, it's not that you can think, wow, they must be really cold and really hungry, go across the street, buy something nice and warm, like a cup of soup, and decide that you want to buy a jacket for them or a sweater or give them something and actually give it to them. And you feel in your heart a sense of compassion, right? Those are three different ways in which you have a certain kind of intention. And it's that moment that you have of, and that feeling that you have of that sense of compassion that you can actually use to dedicate your karma to a higher cause, right? To be able to wish not just this being, but you can actually even move it to say, may all beings not be suffering like this person. Does that make sense? Okay. The thing about emptiness that I brought up in the beginning class, and the reason why I'm talking about dedication and karma, but in terms of emptiness and karma, the reason why they play together is that the person that's giving, the person that's giving, you that's giving, the person that's receiving, and the thing in which you're doing, all of those things are in fact empty. Your karma is even empty. And because your karma is empty and you're empty, what that means is that everything has ultimate potential. Okay? I know, it's sick, right? It's crazy.
So your karma's empty?
Your karma's empty. Oh yeah. That's the thing that's like tricky with karma, because we sometimes think about it and we reify it as if it's not empty, but it is actually empty.
Well, karma is a matter, a physical matter.
I'm not gonna Okay. I'm just gonna present that. I know, Michael, you have a question.
I'm not gonna argue the esoterics of it. I just have a question about what you said. Because I kind of lost you at you feel compassion for value, you get a code, and the dedication of compassion. Like in the moment, are you saying, "Oh, I realize I'm feeling compassion. Now let me dedicate that to compassion"?
No, it doesn't usually work that linearly. I mean, I guess it depends on who you are. I mean, I think there are probably people that are more linear. I think for me, it's been a sense of, and you know, the thing is that this process is for most of us, now I won't say all, but for most of us, it's such a foreign concept, because you don't go around and like do something really great and then you feel like, I'm going to dedicate this to the whole world. Like that is like not the way that we were raised in this country for the most of us. So and dedication is something that I think, it doesn't work. I mean, I'm saying it kind of linearly, like I feel this sense of compassion. So as I give and put this jacket on this person, I am dedicating what I'm feeling to this man, to all people, all beings, you know, to the world. Like it doesn't always happen that way. It does, I think, happen. The gap gets a little closer over time. But what most of us will do is at the end of the night, before you go to bed, lie down. Before you start looking at Netflix and all that other stuff that you do at night and, you know, your Facebook feeds, just take a moment and be like, did I do one good thing today that I really cared about? Like I really tried. Did I do something today? And then if there is something, then you can actually dedicate that to not just one person. You can dedicate, maybe it starts with one person. I hope this will make that person feel better. I hope that person will actually be happier. I hope that person ultimate happiness. And then with that, based on your capacity, you can start to actually be like, not just this one person. Maybe it's actually more than like all, you know, it's.
So you're using dedication like an altruistic wish. Because I think dedication as,
sure.
I'm going to dedicate my book to you, which means
yes.
I honor you because I've.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of like an altruistic wish. Yes, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, that's usually how it is. It's like the way that I felt it in the past is when my team and I, when we do our social impact work and we are on the ground with these girls and we're working with them and seeing these conditions and the situation they're in. Or even like this, and one of the girls, there's a bunch of them that we sponsor, but there's one girl in particular, we sponsor her university. And when I'm on the phone with her, talk to her, it's not just like, I want you to get out of suffering. It's like, I want you and all those girls that are in your village and in your country to get out of suffering. Enough. Like, enough with it. You know, I am not just hoping for you, but I'm hoping for all of them. So it's like that. It's like the feeling of like, it's not just that one person. You just feel like, there's so many. So it's that feeling of how do you, and you feel it, like you feel it in your body. And so you actually, and it does take time to know how you're going to access that. It's not a natural thing, but you do start to realize like, this is just one way of which that I can in my own capacity help this person, but hoping that it's not just this person, it's all, you know, it spreads. And so that's what starts to happen. And that's where dedication is, because it's an unfamiliar practice for most of us, to just be able to start with what you know, start with how you can do it. Even if it's just, you know, I just hope that this will make this person's life a lot easier.
And the theory is that dedication in and of itself has a karmic force.
Yeah. So with this definition is that not just a good deed or a virtuous deed can be done and you can be like, I'm going to give you this ice cream and I hope you're going to have more ice cream for the rest of your life, right? Or it's like, I hope that you have as much joy, for the rest, and you and everyone else to experience all this joy, and it looks like ice cream, and it tastes like ice cream, and it's delivered like an ice cream, but it's not really the ice cream. It's much bigger than that. And so that's what it can start to become. I know. Anyway, I'm gonna move on unless it's like dire, but I'm gonna move on because the reason why I say this is something that can, if you have questions, it's not something that you can necessarily resolve tonight. It is something, and the reason why we talked about cooking it, so smart, is because you do have to cook it. You have to sit with it, and you have to understand what that means to you, and if it means anything to you, actually, for that matter. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But let's go through the class and see where you net out. And if if you're just like, I don't know, gee, this is totally not making sense, we have Dharma date time, and let's get a coffee and chat about it and see how we can help resolve some of that. But there is a tremendous amount of cooking that has to be done with this concept. It is not something that if you have questions about that you're going to resolve tonight. I promise you. It just won't. I mean, people practice this for lifetimes. Retreats, hundreds of thousands of hours are dedicated to this. So I'm just presenting it to you so that you know that there is this out there. And then we'll go into the different types of karmas. And we'll even go into like the builds, like how does karma actually, there's different steps of how to actually get your karma to have action and what that means. And that's in, I think, 2 or 3 more classes. Okay. Yes.
Can I ask you something about this last thing that you just said?
Yes.
What should we do if we have cooked some of these questions? So it's not something that comes to our minds right now, but it's something that you have to think about. What should we do with that kind of questions?
What should you do? So what I'm hearing is, what should you do with questions that you need to cook about?
That the way I took what you said is that it's something that you have to meditate about, think about, like mature inside you.
Mm-hmm.
But there might be some questions that have been there for some of us for a long time.
Sure.
So the question is, what should we do with those questions?
Let's book a Dharma date and talk about it. Yeah, I mean, all of you are coming with different experiences in different places. And so if there are things that are deep-seated that you haven't resolved, I'm happy to take office hours and we can talk about it and see if I can help you or at least point you into a direction where I can. Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah, of course. Okay, here we go. The second one, can we say namen?
Namen.
That is karmic result again, ripening and cooking. Yidu Ming Ongwa. That's undesirable. Say Mi Dewa. It's unhappiness or unpleasant. Nongwa, which is experience. Ni, which is that. And Mi Gewa. Right, which is bad deed. Right, so we had Gewa, which was a good deed. Mi is the negation, Mi Gewa. So this means non-virtue or bad deed is that which brings you a karmic result, which is an undesirable, unpleasant experience. So the thing about Buddhism is that it's not, like I said earlier, it's not like there's a moral implication or a guilt that's associated with it. And in fact, in Tibetan Buddhism, there's no term for guilt. Can you imagine? That's like so cool to me. There's no term for guilt. It's really, in a way, it's almost like accounting. It's like there's pluses and there's minuses. And we'll talk about black and white karmas later in this class or this course. But it's just like accounting, which is what I did all weekend. It was terrible. It's tax season. So what he's saying here is that your good deeds bring happiness and can lead to paradise, and your bad deeds have unpleasant experiences that lead to suffering. Okay? It's pretty straightforward in terms of the presentation of karma. Now, I understand, and this is something, Michael, that you have brought up, which is true, is that the logic of it. You're like, I don't know, this karma thing. The thing, makes no logical sense. And to some degree, you're right. And so in course 4, we talked about 3 levels of reality. Remember that? What were the 3 levels that were presented?
Apparent, hidden, and deeply hidden.
Yeah, like the obvious, hidden, and deeply hidden. Shintu Koryu, right? We talked about. And so what that means is that there are obvious things, obvious realities, and things that we can see, no problem. Then there are hidden things which actually can be deduced. So even the concepts of emptiness go in that category. And then there's what's in the deeply hidden category, which are things that we actually can't see at this moment where we are right now or experience. Well, no, nothing that we can actually see or even deduce to a point. So what that puts us, which is not ideal, I know for some of us, is that it means that you have to base your understanding on higher authority in scripture. Okay. And based on your capacity as you practice, you will start to gain, the idea is that you actually start to gain some understanding and insight into what this system is and what it means and how it works and how it doesn't. Okay. So I'm just going to put that out there so that we're on that same page there. The ideas here that we're looking at of karma, of non-virtue and virtue actions, and bad and good deeds, and what that means is that the way in which we understand our actions, the way in which we think about causality has actually been mixed up. Because what the scriptures is basically alluding to is that we're confused of karmic causation. We think that the things that we do that make us happy, we think that there are certain things that we do that bring us happiness that actually bring us negative karma, and vice versa. We think that there's luck that's part of the equation, which in Buddhism there's no luck. It's not like it was luck that you got a tax refund for a certain amount of X dollars. That wasn't luck. It's not luck that you ran into somebody on the street. It's not stealing or cheating or lying doesn't bring you more money. It's not like having more Instagram followers makes you more successful. We have these ideas of how things are cause and effect. And what we're going to start to unpack tonight is that they actually don't. That doesn't work in that system. And so it means that there's a different framework in which you have to start to understand what causality really means and where it comes from. Okay. Last one. Can we say yidu-ing?
Yidu-ing.
That is desirable result. Mi-ing.
Mi-ing.
That's undesirable results. Kepa.
Kepa.
Means gives you. Dini.
Dini.
These two. Lei Shempa.
Shempa.
Which means other types. Leilung.
Leilung.
Which means karma. And maten.
Maten.
Which means neutral karma. Just so you know, when it says lung maten, it basically means when you see the neutral karma, it means in the scriptures that it's not clarified by the Buddha. Like he didn't specifically clarify every single type of good and bad karma out there. There's this kind of category of neutral karmas that are out there, for those of you that want to know. So this means karma which is other than those two which give you desirable or undesirable results is neutral karma. Okay. Most of the time you think of neutral karma as things where actually we spend a lot of time on neutral karma. Like it's things that we're not engaging our mind, and not necessarily in a virtuous way or a non-virtuous way, like vegging out and watching Netflix is a neutral karma. For the most part. I don't know. I guess it depends what you're watching. You know, it depends what you're watching. Yeah. But it's really, it's like there's no, neutral karma usually is something where it's not aimed for virtue or good deeds, and it's not aimed for non-virtue and bad deeds. It's a space in between. And we actually spend a lot of time doing neutral karmas, walking down the street, kind of just zoning out, you know, thinking about really nothing that's really of virtue or of support or help to anybody else.
Is that something like thinking I need to sharpen my pencil?
Yeah, that would be like a neutral karma.
Is meditation neutral karma?
It depends how you're meditating. If you're zoning out, then it would be.
If you're watching your breath.
No, it's not. No, because actually,
It's virtues.
it is virtuous, and there's different degrees of that, right? And different degrees of what you're meditating on and your intention behind it. But the act of meditation itself is a virtuous, considered a virtuous karma. Now, it's like even doing your mantras. Like doing your mantras is a virtuous karma. It's just how present are you, right? Based on your focus and your intention and that would also change the level and the charge of the karma. Yeah. Yes.
So this is specifically talking about seeds that you plant, right? Karmas that you plant.
These are specifically talking about 3 different types of karmas in the Abhidharma school.
Okay. So it's not discriminating between something you've done versus something you experience.
It's non-discriminating between something you've done and something you've experienced. What do you mean?
I mean, because a lot of this is like, it's good because my intention behind it is good, or it's neutral because there was no good or bad intention behind it. And we talk about like watching Netflix. Maybe my intention was good, but I'm sitting there and like a lot of it is just experiencing things rather than planting.
Totally.
I mean, I know it's like you're constantly planting.
Yes,
but
right.
I feel like this isn't necessarily talking about the experience or the result of the seed. It's rather you planting the seed.
No, it's not. You're right. It's not talking about the result. It's just identifying that there are these 3. And then we'll talk about like mixed karmas, right? Because there's kind of going to be like for the most part, there aren't pure karmas all the time. So you'll have mixtures of it, right? Like sharpening my pencil, right, is a very but if it's like I'm sharpening my pencil to make it better, you know, to make it easier for my colleague to be able to write notes so that she or he is more productive. There's like, right, but the actual act of it is just neutral. It just doesn't, it means that there are karmas that are planted, but there's also karmas that are just planted that don't really do much. They don't really ripen to much because they're neutral.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. 4 kinds of good karmic deeds. 1. So these are 4 kinds of good karmic deeds, okay? The first one, can you say Dundam Gewa? Okay, so Dundam means ultimate, and what's Gewa? Good deed or virtuous deed. So it means the first one is nirvana.
Is there types of results?
What do we say this was?
Karma.
So this one actually is nominal. It's nominally karma. So you're right. Like here, it's not really a deed. It's 4 kind of deeds, right? It's not really a deed. It's not an action. So it's one of those where it gets you to it, but it's not technically an actual deed.
And how do these classifications map with the ones we just did? Like, are we getting more and more specific, or are we just?
We're saying within good deeds, there are 4 kinds of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, on one of them, I started creating crumbs, like on websites, because I was like, just so you know, this is.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this one's nominal. It's a little bit of like if you're in a debate, you'd be like, that's not an action, or you're right, it's not an action. It's not. But it is one of the 4 that they have in the Abhidharma school. It's nominally virtue. It is a result. Okay? Supriya. Head of logic. Here we go. Number 2. Can we say Nongo,
No.
Niki,
Niki.
and Gewa?
Gewa.
So Nongo is nature and essence. Niki is very, by. And Gewa, good deed. So what this one is that there are good deeds by its very nature.
But
hey. And there are 5 of them. Hence the crumbs on the top to keep you focused, to be like, where are we? Okay. Okay, there are 5 good deeds by their very nature. There's 3 in the first one that I put. 3 roots of virtue. I'm bucketing it for you too, and animating it. Okay. So Lama Chim Jampe Yang is saying that the first one, the first bucket is 3 roots of virtue is what he's calling. 3 kinds of mental functions, okay? Which by their very nature, he's saying, is virtuous. And the first one he's saying is duchak mepa. And what that means, it's non-desire. The definition he has is understanding the selflessness of things and so not desiring them. So he's basically saying, listen, there's 3 different ways that you can have non-desire. One is you just have no desire. No, you don't want it. You don't care for it. The second one is you're distracted by other things, like you're happy, having a time, so you don't actually desire that thing. You're just distracted. And the third one is you desire something, but you are actively understanding that you're trying to not desire it in the wrong way. Right? So out of those 3, which one do you think he's saying that the non-desire is he talking about?
the active one.
The active one, the third one. In the tradition, basically, the ability to withhold or refrain. The ability to refrain is a massive virtue. They actually say it's better to refrain from bad action when you're on the tip of doing something that's non-virtuous than going and meditating in a cave for a long period of time. Yeah. I'm sorry? Yeah?
That's just a relief.
I know. It is a relief. You know, it's interesting, right? I mean, I think that's interesting. So the first one he's saying is it's that you're not ignorantly desiring things. You're not desiring things and thinking things are self-existent. Getting that apartment makes me happy. You know, getting that job, getting that partner, getting that, right? The things that we want. If I had that handbag, if I had that car, if I had that trip, that vacation, it's not self-existently looking at things. It's understanding where things really come from and understanding the selflessness of things. It doesn't mean that you can't want it. That's not true. Like, you should want to be happy. You should want those things. It's just understanding how to look at it and understanding where that comes from. Does that make sense? Okay.
It's like, so selflessness is like emptiness, really, in it's
all, yeah, it's always like everything it's colored, right, or founded with this idea of wisdom, right, or understanding selflessness to it. It's not saying that you can. So like when you hear people say like grasping is ignorant desire. That's really what it is. It doesn't mean that you don't want it. Like you should want to have a nice life. That's crazy. Like why on earth would you not want that? And I think that sometimes when you think of Buddhism, you're like, oh, I'm supposed to have nothing. And, like it's not like that. It doesn't have to be. And it's also based on your capacity, of who you are, where your struggles are. But it's understanding that things are not self-existent and understanding the other side of that coin, how karma works, and playing with that relationship of the two when you are engaging with the things that you do want and desire. So like when we start with the meditation in the beginning, where it's like, what are your heart's desire? What do you want? There's nothing wrong with that. But if you remember last week, we kind of ended that segment with understanding the causes of how to get that. That's where understanding wisdom comes in. That's where you're not doing it ignorantly. That's where you're understanding that if I want more time in my life, because I feel so busy all the time, then I have to be able to give other people more time in their life, right? It's this idea that by hoarding things for myself isn't going to give me a sense of abundance. And we don't really have that concept here. It's like, it's under, and we'll go into like the virtue or 10 kind of the top 10 non-virtue deeds. But that's what that means. Okay, second one. It's Shedang Mepa, which is non-hatred or understanding selflessness and so not hating. The word hate seems a bit aggressive. When you think about, though, in the center of wheel life, you have what two animals that mean what two things? Does anyone know? Did you say tiger?
I don't know.
It's awesome. There's a snake and there's a rooster, and they represent hatred and anger. Basically, in the wheel of life, the idea is that suffering, the center of our suffering existence comes from the ignorance of desire of hatred. Okay, so when he talks about this idea of non-hatred, it's not that you're going around like killing people and like it's much more subtle than that. It's as subtle as like liking and disliking ignorantly. It's feeling agitation or irritation and dislike about somebody, for instance. It's not so much of like, I hate you, I want you to die. That's not, most of us aren't doing that. I mean, I hope you're not. Please don't. But it is more just like, that person just, bothers me. Just looking at that person makes me go crazy. I don't want to see that person, right? It's like that kind of, and then even the subtleties of what that can be, right? Where there's even mild agitation, right? Yes.
I was going to ask about agitation. Is it, because like sometimes when I feel agitated, it's like, I don't like hate you, it's just at this moment,
yeah.
I'm agitated.
Yes.
So does that fall under?
That would be, that's going to be also like your understanding your self-awareness. Is that agitation about someone else? Is it really you? Is it, it's all you, right? So this is specifically like thinking that person self-existently is the cause of your agitation, rather than you saying, I'm feeling a little agitated today. It's nothing to do with you. You're feeling it, but it's not you. It's me. I'm dealing with my own stuff. That's different. Yeah.
And then when is it like, never mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can talk to me about it afterwards too. Yes.
What about yourself? Like being angry at yourself?
That's a great one. Sure. Yeah.
It's a great one. Yeah.
Maybe you should try it out.
That's a really, it's so, yeah, and we do it all the time. Most of us are so incredibly hard on ourselves. And that's why even in the meditation we start, it's like, and you have to find what works for you, but that's why there's so much of, it starts on the premise of you're actually giving yourself the space and and giving yourself the vision to have the life that you have out of a place of loving kindness, because we don't do that very much to ourselves. Yeah. So that's a very good one.
So what's the fix?
Meditate.
No,
We'll talk about it. Third one, Timuk Mepa, non-ignorance. So it's wisdom, which we've talked about, right? Not seeing things self-existently is really ultimately what that means. Okay. If you understood how things worked, if you understand how karma works, if you understand the idea of no self, and you knew that if you don't want someone yelling at you anymore, right? If you knew the cause of someone yelling at you is you yelling, why on earth would you turn around and start screaming at your landlord? You know, or your sister, or your mom, or, you know, or yourself, right? If you understand cause and effect in the way that they're talking about in this system, the idea of wisdom is that you wouldn't, why would you behave that way? I'd be crazy. Why would you do that? Okay. Yes.
For number 2 and 3, does the same rule apply about like being tempted and then resisting
Yes.
temptation?
Sure. Totally. Across the board.
Where it becomes more
Yes.
a good deed when you stop yourself.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. For all things too. But it is, yeah. It's just,
Yeah.
Okay. Next 2, we have 2 thoughts of virtue. So these are, what he's saying is that these are always present when you're doing virtue in the Abhidharma system. These are the 2 thoughts that are always present, is what the presentation is. Okay. Again, it also like applies to restraint here. So it's nyoksa, which is avoid bad deeds from reasons relating to yourself. So the way that they talk about it, they use a word shame. It's like you're avoiding to do bad things because you are ashamed, like you have shame for yourself. Like you wouldn't do it because you'd be shameful. That word is like, I'll just be honest, it rubs me the wrong way. I have like a lot of problems with that word. I don't know. It's just like women and shame and all that stuff. Yes. Can I finish the presentation, or is the question going to relate to the presentation?
it relates to the presentation.
Okay.
When it says bad deeds,
Yes.
does that mean that the person has to be aware of the karmic effect? Or could it just be something that in your consciousness might be bad, without necessarily understanding how bad deeds create bad karma? Like, is it a virtue to not want to do something bad, or to want to do something good, not understanding how karma works?
I would say that we're in the presentation of understanding it in context of how it's good and bad karma. So I would keep it in that system. But like for someone who doesn't even know, like let's say you're somebody, the charge would be so different, right? Like it's one thing if you know where karma comes from and you're refraining from being inappropriate, right? Or bad. And you understand and you're withholding from that. That's different intention than just doing it because you just don't want to be bad. Like knowing that it's going to actually be an effect for your future self is one thing, and doing it with like ignorance in a way, right? Just to be like, I just don't want to do it is another thing. So I would say the charge is probably different. But it still would apply. I mean, it is still, yeah.
Just curious about how people end up having good things happen without understanding the system. Like if
Sure.
you just want to be happy.
Sure.
Right before you
Yeah.
get into the deeper struggle.
Yeah. I mean, I think that people I know, well, that's an interesting question. From my experience, I think that there are people out there that may not be traditional practitioners, like won't be formal practitioners in a traditional sense, but they have ingrained a certain philosophy that they've brought in to this lifetime. It's just a part of their system. So they may not know these terms and they may not know the philosophy, but it's become a part of them however way that they've had the karma to be able to understand that. Like I have a client of mine that just is not a Buddhist practitioner, but he inherently just knows that if I help other people, if I help my team, if I help my employees. And he's based his entire philosophy on that, growing his company for 20 some years. Then he's like, I've just noticed that they help me. And so he focused his entire system on helping his team. He has no idea about karma. That's just something he's like, it seems to work. And that's my focus. So does that help a little bit?
That's nice.
Yeah, it is. It's really beautiful. And you're just like, man, I wish I knew that. You know, just coming into it, I had to study it. You know, it's like self-taught. Okay. So here it's saying basically like the way that I like to interpret it, and this is not in scripture, is more about integrity. It's about holding a certain level of posture for yourself. It's about knowing that you're not going to be doing certain deeds because it's not just like shame because you feel bad about who you are, but to me it works better for me when it's about having a certain level of integrity of what you believe in. Okay. But in the way it's been presented has been, the term that they use is shame. Okay.
That's why there's no word for guilt.
I know, you got shame. Yeah. Who needs guilt when you have shame? I know, right? Last one is trilyu, which is avoiding bad deeds for reasons relating to others. So this idea too is, you know, you're not doing something bad because you don't want other people to find out. Is really it. Like, you know, you're not going to go steal that money in someone's bag that's sitting right there, all that cash, because you're worried that you'll get caught. Is really the idea.
What's an example for like not having that extra drink because you know you'll be hungover?
Mm-hmm.
And then 5 is
Not having that extra drink because you don't want them to think you're sloppy.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, make it applicable to your life. Okay. Ready? We're okay to move on? Yes.
I have a quick question. Just the title of it. So five good deeds by their very nature.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that doesn't mean that they are self-existently good,
No.
right? Because like the first 3 are sneaky in that there's wisdom inherent in them.
Totally.
But the last 2, it kind of is odd to me that they're good by their very nature.
Yeah, I agree.
But
I basically they're saying that it will help you avoid, like if you're thinking about these things, it's what helps mitigate you from creating bad virtue. That's really
no
what
matter
it is.
what, even if you do it ignorantly.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
if
If
I
you
have a
think
really
about
bad day
sure.
and I'm
Yeah.
about to yell at you, and I catch myself that I don't want to yell at you because then everyone's gonna know what you're
Yeah.
doing.
There's some result.
Mhm.
And even though it's not totally pure,
Yeah.
it's still at least giving me some good
Yeah.
virtue.
It's holding
to
that
stop
line for you.
Myself from yelling.
Also, the nature might be on the premise of what they defined before as good, bad, and neutral.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we're moving along. I'm going to move along because we have more. Okay, 3. It's sungden. Can we say sungden?
Yeah.
And that's association. So basically, this idea is that it's virtuous by association. So the Abhidharma school loves talking about mind, the mental functions, like how it's defined, how it's linked, how it fits together, the different aspects of it. And the idea is that actually main mind and mental functions, there are 5 different ways that they link together. We're not going to talk about them, but they can happen at the same time. And the concept is that if your main mind is doing something virtuous, the mental functions, all the feelings, the feelingness, like I'm here with the intention, with a virtuous intention of wanting to share this knowledge to you so that you can all be free from suffering. While I'm doing that, my feelings of everything that I'm feeling, hot, cold, happy, sad, joy, like all those feelings, it taints everything. By association, they're all become virtuous. So it would be equivalent to saying, if there's a glass, if this is my mental function, and this is if my main mind is green, right? If I put my glass in front of it, it will make this glass green. So it taints it all. Does that make sense? I don't know. I didn't know if I needed to do this. I think you got it, but okay. So that's what it's saying. It's that all those other, by association, when you have a virtuous thought that's happening, the other things that are happening will also become virtuous in terms of the mental functions that you have, the feelings that you have within the Abhidharma school.
So what about if, like, for example, I'm walking down the street and I see a person, it's cold out. I see a homeless person, it's cold out. And I stop and give them money. I'm doing a good deed.
Yes.
But sneaky self,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
There's layers below that.
Sure.
And so it's like, I'm doing a good deed. This is good karma. I'm a great practitioner. I'm such a good person. Like,
yeah.
Where there's like,
sure.
we do good things, but then there's also like reaffirming false ideas.
Yeah.
Many layers.
Yeah.
So how, if we're talking about like a virtuous action, coloring all of the mental functions that happen, I'm assuming then also non-virtuous actions.
Yes.
Yes.
Totally.
So
that's why, like, when you're angry, that's why it's so toxic, that you're screwing yourself over beyond. It's not just, you're not just angry in that one moment, but it actually colors it stains all of it. And that's why it's so, I mean, I think we go into one of the courses, I can't remember which one, but anger is just, depending what and also depending on what vows you have, it really puts you back quite a bit. Can.
So non-virtuous also associated.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But for example, all those little minor things take on a cloak of virtue because her fundamental. That's the question.
Well, I would probably.
It's the other way, right?
It's actually the other way around because it's your main mind has all these different, and we'll go into like mixed karmas, but your main mind has all these different. It's not just a pure play, and so whatever that mixes, it's not a pure blue. It's like a green blue because it's mixed with other stuff. Then all your mental functions would have a certain taint of that main aspect because that's still within your main mind. The mental functions would be like how you're feeling. Like, for instance, for me to sit here and say I'm teaching this information, the ability for me to even have discretion, like Santi, Thomas, female, male, that discretion right there, that actually is colored as virtuous in that moment. That's what they're saying in this school. Okay, we're moving on. We're going to be here all night. Okay, number 4, Kunlong. Kunlong is virtuous motivation, which means virtuous by motivation. And this is verbal and physical as well. I'm sorry, did I say mental and physical? Yeah. No, verbal and physical. It's always, mental is always part of it. So the famous story is that they have in the scriptures is in India, there is a man that's walking up a mountain during a rainstorm during the monsoon season. If you've ever been in Asia during the monsoon season, it is horrific. And he's wearing one of those dhotis, right? And so he's wearing dhoti and a sandal, that's all he has. He's walking and he sees a Buddha, because there's a lot of Buddhas that you'll see in India that are just statues. So he sees a Buddha and he's like, it's pouring rain. Like some Buddha shouldn't be just getting soaked in rain. And he has nothing, he can't get rid of his dhoti. So he decides to take his sandal and he puts it on the head of the Buddha to cover the head, right? Like, it's precious, I want to cover the head. 5 minutes later, and he moves on. 5 minutes later, another man's walking, comes, and he looks over and sees the Buddha, and he thinks, what? How disrespectful! That's disgusting. Like the shoe is one of the most. It's not a pure thing, right? So he takes it off. Those two, both of them, motivation, thumbs up or thumbs down. Good, right? So this idea here is that, like, it's your intention. It's not necessarily just the outcome. The idea is that there's a virtue through your motivation, through your intention, even if it doesn't look like what you think it is, right? There's still virtue in that, which is actually really beautiful too, because there are a lot of times we do things with a good intent and then the result doesn't happen. And people are like, what was that? That was so stupid. Or, you know, like how many times does that happen? And you're just like, I was just trying to help, you know? And we get all like defensive and all crazy and everyone gets so crazy. Like, in this school, basically, it's like, just chill out. It's fine. Like, you did it, and you can't be attached to the results of it. You do it. You do the best you can. If you have a practice, you dedicate the effort, let it go. And what it ends up being is what it ends up being. And that is a different karma ripening at a different time, which we'll talk about later in this course, which we can't talk about now. Okay, I'm going to go through these 10 non-virtues, because you need to know these.
Is that number 5?
No, this is, we're done with that section. There was 4.
Only 4. Yeah.
Yes. So we're going to go do the top 10, David Letterman's top 10. There are people in this world that don't even know what that means anymore. I feel very old. David Letterman, they're like, what?
25.
Never mind. Huh? I know. 25. Okay. You have to know virtues, the virtues and non-virtues if you're taking a karma course. I have to do that. So they're grouped in body, speech, and mind, and we'll do them in buckets. They're also called, what are they also called for those of us that have taken vows? Yeah, the Prakti Moksha vows. Okay, they're also vows that they have. And you can actually take these vows at some point if you're interested, which we can talk about later. We do a course on the Bodhisattva vows, which is actually awesome, later on. Okay, so there are technically, Master Vasubandhu says that there are technically 6 root non-virtues. There are 84,000 in total, but we, because you're the lucky ones, are going to focus on 10. And these are the most popular ones that we all have, apparently. Okay. You let me know if you think that's true. The first one, or actually the first section actually, is, we're starting with body. Sorry. The first one is killing. Sokchu. Want to say Sokchu? Okay. And that's killing. This includes suicide. It includes, it also includes abortions. In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, they believe that once your cell is, or once an egg is fertilized, at that moment of fertilization, that's actually the beginning of life. It's when a being comes out of the bardo stage into what's called the intermediary state. So that's the beginning of life. So abortion is technically considered killing. I'm going to say something too before we just, like, so I can set this up. Huh?
I did not know Buddhists were pro-lifers. That was a big thought.
Yeah. So, there's 2 things. One is there are ways to purify karmas. Okay. It's not like you do something and you're just screwed. And you're like, okay, I guess I'll just wait for that thing to just pop out whenever it wants, because that sucks. It does. That would be for, there are ways to purify it. Secondly, these are 10 non-virtues that were presented based on different capacities. And as you evolve your practice, you will start to see how some of this information will become multifaceted, okay? What I will say too is that this is not scripture too, this is just me talking, is that ultimately a Buddhist practice is a balance of masculine and feminine. When you see deities and you see tankas, when you look at them, they actually embody both the masculine and feminine, okay? And so, and that's what is the ultimate goal. Like there's a balance that happens. So I'm not going to go into that and what that really means. But for those of you that are seeking a path and have a practice, there is the two sides of the bull. And whatever, these are, it's my responsibility to relay this message. Some of it might make you uncomfortable. If it doesn't work for you, just like I've always said, you shelve it and you let it sit, and you can address it at another time when you are ready, or we can talk about it too at some point if you're interested. But these are just the general kind of standard 10 non-virtues that have been presented. Okay. So the first one, again, is killing. So it is your life. They do talk about abortion. The second one is stealing. It's not just like stealing, like taking stuff from, it really means like taking things that weren't given to you. That's really what it means. It's not just like going in and robbing people's homes and stuff like that. It's not as crass as that. Another, like a thing that I think about with stealing a lot of the times, which I'm doing right now actually, is stealing time. When we're late, we're stealing time. So you have to look at like the subtleties of it and what that means, right? Like killing too, is it like, it's one thing to go after a bug, like a roach, because you're just like, I hate roaches and they're self-existently disgusting. And it's, or like I have a girlfriend of mine who was really just like feeling badly about killing a mosquito. But these mosquitoes were like eating up her son. And her son was just a torment. And she's like, I had to kill these mosquitoes in the room. And it was the thing that she was like talking to me about. So, you sit with this, you see the layers of it, you see how it works, there's different, and you're killing beings all the time accidentally, like driving in a car and I'm killing beings. That's a different intention than going after, like, there's a different way of how your motivation does make a difference, and it does impact the karma. Okay. Third one, sexual misconduct. That doesn't just speak to adultery. In the scriptures, it also speaks to non-consensual sex. It speaks to historically having sex in front of temples, sleeping with your relatives. They don't believe that in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, you don't have to like be married before you have sex. It's not like that in the tradition. They do talk about homosexuality. They talk about oral sex. There's a lot of things that they talk about. And again, my understanding of that information is that there are certain, when this content when it was delivered, there's a certain group of people that they were delivering this information for, to be able to start teaching about the idea of restraint and what restraining means. I'm just going to leave it at that, okay? Or we'll be here all night. The next one is speech. There's 4 in speech. The first one is lying, which is really about not just outrightly lying, but even giving a false impression. Misleading somebody to think something versus another. Like Instagram all the time. Drives me crazy. It's crazy, right? It's just like a flood of just... Right? It's crazy. I have friends of mine that are like, look, her life is so amazing. And I'm like, really, you guys? It's crazy. Look at my aspirational life. Okay. Sorry. Just, people do it all the time. Like I noticed that also with like resumes. I'm like, I don't know, are you really? It's weird. So that's what that means. The next one is divisive speech. So divisive speech means, divisive speech is really when you're splitting people up in any way. I mean, to do it for a sangha is a big non-virtue, but it's really when you're starting to split people up. Even when you're doing something subtle, like we do it a lot when we're trying to have someone be on our side. Like, did you see what so-and-so did? Wasn't that messed up? And you want them to agree with you. And if you don't, you get upset. But you're like, you're trying to create sides, right? What? That's so messed up that they did that. Could you believe that? Like, even those moments is considered divisive speech. I know, everyone's going to be like, man, I'm so terrible. The thing that will be interesting about this is that it's not that you're a bad person, but you do start to become more aware. You just start to become more aware of the subtleties. So if you come out of class and you're just like, man, I'm just like such a shitty person. Like, I shouldn't do this or do that, or I'm just a terrible person. It's not that you were any different like a week ago or yesterday or even 2 hours ago. You're still the same. You've just become more aware of these subtleties. Next one, harsh words. It's not just screaming, but it's cutting people down in any way. Making people feel bad, or even saying something at someone's expense. You know, people use humor a lot to cut people down, and that doesn't sound harsh. It sounds funny, but that would be considered harsh language or harsh words. And number 7 is meaningless talk. This is really just like sometimes you'll see as idle talk. It doesn't mean that you can't, it's like you're at a work party and you're hanging out and it's just, and you're like, I'm not going to engage in idle talk, so I'm going to don't do that. That's just like weird. You'll just be weird. You're not going to connect. Like, that's one thing. It's another thing just to have idle talk, just like, you hear the term like shooting the shit, right? There's one thing of just doing that for no reason at all. It's another thing to do it because you know that you're using a certain understanding of the context that you're in. You're not going to be having these deep, like, oh, what kind of suffering have you experienced? Like, don't do that. It's just weird. It won't go over well. People won't want to, yeah. So, but it's really just like understanding not to have meaningless talk. Have talk that's meaningful and trying to stay in that space and understanding that, like, gossiping, it's just a waste of time and energy. It works against you completely. You're better off not saying anything at all.
Gossiping is more like divisive speech, though, right?
It can be, yeah, sure. I mean, it depends what you're gossiping about. Like, oh, did you see what so-and-so celebrity wore on the Oscars? It's like, I don't know, I don't really care. Like, what? Right?
So some meaningless talk has an emotional component. Friends.
Sure.
Friends
yes.
talk crap all the time.
Yeah.
They're really saying, I love you back, right?
Yeah, I know. That's a tricky one. You have to use your own discretion of what that is for you and how that works. Like, if you have to use your own discretion, because sometimes it's the same thing with my family. Like, I'm not going to sit around and talk about karma when we hang out. It won't happen. They won't, and they're not prepared for it either. And so it's also like, as a practitioner, you start to understand capacity and how you're going to make connection and have conversations that are more meaningful based on not just your capacity, but understanding their capacity, right? So if you have friends that get together and that's the way you engage to have connection, that's great. Like, continue doing that, of course. Don't be off-putting so that you're not then you're disconnected. That's crazy. But understand too that you're doing it with a certain intention, knowing that just don't do it mindlessly is basically what you keep an eye on. That's all. Okay, we're almost done. We have 3 more to go. Last 3 are in mind. Number 8 is napsem, and that's craving. It's craving can be coveting. Sometimes you hear that term, which feels very Christian to me, so I don't like to use it, but that's another way. Desire, which we've talked about. It's the root of jealousy. It's like you want something that someone else doesn't, that someone else has. That feeling like, man, I wish I had that. Or no, it's not just so much I wish it's wanting what others have instead of rejoicing. Like I have a friend of mine, a neighbor of mine, he's a director, and he's in this group of other directors, and you have one agent, and one of the guys in the group, they're both bidding on the same job. And I saw him in the hallway. How you doing? He goes, okay, I just lost a bid. And I said, oh, that's a bummer. He goes, I lost a bid to one of my friends though. It just like really hurts. It's like I really wanted it. And like that, instead of rejoicing, being like, that's awesome, man. I'm so glad you got it. Like, if it wasn't me, I'm glad it was you, and rejoicing with your competition and being happy for them, being like, great, I'm so glad that you got that press. I'm so glad that, that you got that raise. I'm so glad that you were able to buy a home or whatever, right? It's that sense of rejoice. Yes.
But don't we able to allow ourselves a split second of like self-pity to make us feel naturally okay in a moment?
It can. I mean, sometimes it does, but actually over time, it starts to become less of it. Because you understand how karma works and you don't have it. You
not even a thought of it. You just automatically rejoicing that.
Yeah, you're just happy. Because you want people to be happy for you. If you got
focuses on, because you can change it.
Yeah.
He already won.
Sure. It's their karma ripening. It was their karma ripening and this is yours. You wanting that doesn't change it. It just plants a seed. So why even bother? Right? If the karma wasn't for you to get the job, you're not going to get the job. Someone else was going to get it.
That's how I'm looking at it. Yeah.
Right? So if you just understand it from that, you just let it go. You're like, oh, that happened, And it is not an easy thing. We do it often. But it does start to become less. And it's even just your awareness of knowing, like, even just knowing that, oh, I felt that way. And then you start to feel, like at some point you start to practice so much that you actually feel bad. Like you feel bad that you felt like you wanted something that someone else was having. Or you feel bad that you made a joke that actually was kind of hurtful. Even if it was funny, right? Or you feel bad that you just spent like 2 hours just wasting time talking about stupid stuff that it doesn't add any value at all to anybody. Like really, it could have been so many other things. And so you start to actually feel like physically and emotionally, you do feel it. You feel like, why? Why was I doing that when I know that that's not what I'm doing? And that's just part of the path. It doesn't go from learning this stuff and then stepping outside and being like, okay, I'm just a totally different person. But you start to see it. And then you start to see that, like even the anger, right? It goes from you just act the way you want because you feel like you have the right to be able to express yourself, to then it becomes, it takes a week to realize like, oh, maybe I shouldn't. So then you go back and you reconcile and right? You apologize and you try to make it better. And then it starts to go from a week to 3 days to a day to 6 hours to 2 hours to 1 hour to like, it actually gets shorter, where that ability to refrain because you understand the karmic implications, you don't even engage with that. And you see it happening. Like you see the moment when someone is doing something or saying something that you want to respond to, and you know that urge. And in that moment, instead of you sit back and you just, that's it. And you relax and you don't, it doesn't have that charge.
Some people are raised like that.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And some of us, like me, we're not. Who's like, say what you need to say.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Yes.
Also, isn't there a line between refrain and like repressing?
Yeah. I would say, so this is on the scripture but I would say that there is a difference between the two. Because refraining in this context is understanding and having a sense of wisdom of why you're refraining. Repressing can be a bunch of different things. You repress because you're fearful. You repress because you don't have the confidence. You're repressing because there's other implications I think that come from oppression or repression. That's what I would say. And I'm not a psychotherapist, but that's what I would. Yeah, that's a good question though, because I think that repressing is not what we're talking about, right? it's understanding how to refrain from with wisdom, understanding what the implications are. Yeah. And I do think that karmically that has a different charge too, right? Because your motivation of why you're not saying something or why you're not, right? It's a different motivation. Yes.
It just would make me think that into refrain, you're choosing.
Yeah.
And repressing, it's more compulsive to whatever the other things are.
I mean, it could be more habituated. Yeah. It could be more like some people. I think that refrain or it's out of habit. It's their defense mechanism more so than a cognitive. Like I understand what this is going to do. Yeah. Okay. Number 9, ill will, meaning harmful intent for others. It's that feeling of being like, oh, they got a ticket? Well, they deserved it. I don't know why that came to mind, but, right? It's that like, they deserved it.
Oh,
like,
what about karma caught up on them? Because they knew they shouldn't
but
be
it's
there in the first place.
Totally. But it's still that feeling, that glee. It's that rejoice, that feeling of satisfaction, of like, yeah, they deserved it. I know.
So you can think they should have done yada, 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 but you don't go, they deserved it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that was their karma, and but it's that satisfaction, like that, yeah, I was right. They're, it's that feeling.
A lot of these kind of key into emptiness, right? Like if the ticket is empty and their deed was empty, then there's no point having ill will about it, right?
Totally.
If something is...
Of course.
Is empty,
totally. I mean, and that's just, so like, usually when the Prakti-Moksha vows are given too, it's the beginning of a system of different vows. It's the baseline. And so as you take this, it's really practicing on just watching your mind and observing, having some level of self-awareness, and also understanding how to reframe appropriately. And then from there, you start to build your knowledge and your practice of what does karma mean? What does emptiness mean? How does that all make sense to it? But a lot of the times, like when I first took these vows, I think I had like a basic concept of it, but it was really so that I wasn't out there, planting negative seeds. The idea of emptiness was still very conceptual, but like I didn't have a deep understanding of it. It was just, this is like the beginning of it. Yeah. And that's why the vows, as you go into the next ones, they get more elaborate. And the higher vows you have trumps over these. Like your like bodhisattva vows, for instance, like in your bodhisattva vows, if you have them, you might be in a situation where you do need to lie because it's for the safety of the people that you care about. That would actually trump these vows. Yeah. So there are like these hierarchies of vows.
Or killing self-defense.
Sure. Right. Well.
Only to protect,
Right. Like, yeah, if it's like to protection. Right. Sure. Okay. Last one. Wrong view, which is, where we're landing, right? With Lokta, which is ultimately believing that karma doesn't exist.
I'm never getting to Nirvana.
You will.
Isn't it also that things are self-existent?
Yeah, right. Like karma, having wrong view. That karma doesn't exist, that things aren't that things are self-existent. Yeah, that's right. I once had a teacher say to me, because I was struggling with some of this, the karma one and emptiness in particular too, and he would say, the back door to enlightenment. I was like, what? He goes, humility. I was like, maybe I'll do that instead. Okay.
Sashi Kuki Jushin Mito Tran Rira Lingshi Lende Impati Samge Shindu Ite Uardi Drokun Nanda Shinra Jupasho
Iram Guru Ratna Mandalakam Viratayami
Gewa
Di Geokum Sunam Yeshe Sosokshi Sunam Yeshe Lejuwe Dapa Kuni Tupasho. Just a quick dedication. Sit in a meditative pose. Just take a moment and acknowledge that you spent time and effort and energy being in class, coming to class tonight, and staying in class, willing and open to receive this information and teaching. Acknowledge your effort. Commend yourself for it. It's not something you had to do. Rejoice in what you've learned tonight, even if it's a little bit, any aspect of it, or all of it. Rejoice. And send that heartfelt rejoice to someone out there that you know who's having a hard time. Someone out there that you know that could use this knowledge, or at the very least, someone that you can be there for. Okay. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, G.